Hey everybody, I'm back, and now we're going to take this Firebase and we're going to upload our images to Firebase storage. And so the first thing I want you to do is, I can't remember if we did this in the last video or not, but I want to make sure that you have got your rules set up in both Firestore so that it will allow read and write as long as the request is before this date, which should be in the future. Automatically, it made mine be the day after Christmas. And we're going to take that rule and make sure it's also in storage. You can see mine is, by default, it is only allow read and write if request.auth is not equal to null. In other words, only allow read and write if the person sending it is a registered user. But we don't want to go through the process of registering users just yet. So I'm just going to publish that change, make sure that's there. And then I noticed I made an error in the last video. So I want to go back to project settings, and I was just sort of not paying attention here. What we want to do is we don't want to grab this Firestore SDK because we haven't installed that locally yet. We're going to grab it instead from a CDN, and we're going to just copy and paste that. So in CDN, and there's also that Firebase config that we grabbed. But we're going to put this in index.html, and in place of that other line, we're going to add Firebase app from this CDN. And I'm also going to add from that same CDN, I'm going to add Firebase storage and Firebase Firestore. So now we should have access to all of those three libraries. And here and just make sure you don't have any error messages when you load up your index.html. And right now, if I drag something in, it's not going to upload anything because I haven't set that up, but we're going to set that up now. So the first thing I want to do is actually disable the add to gallery, because we don't want to add directly to the gallery. We want to add to the gallery from Firebase. But first, before we add to the gallery and before we grab that, we're going to upload it to Firebase storage. So what we should see at the end of this video is here in storage, we'll start getting images in our storage. And to do that, I just need to create a function called upload file that's going to take in our file and also some metadata that says what kind of file that is. So I'll make that metadata object too. I'll say const metadata equals, and we're going to say, I think it's going to be content type. Just double checking that. Yeah, we want to say content type, and we'll set that equal to file dot type. So now we'll have our file that comes in from e.datatransfer.files, and we'll have this metadata that we can get off of that file. And we'll send both of those to this function upload file, which I'm about to write. And we're going to create a function at the bottom of the page that takes in a file and the metadata, and ultimately is going to upload it. But the first thing I want to do is get a random unique identifier. And to do that, I'm going to use the crypto web API, and I'm going to use specifically get random values. And we're going to pass in a typed array and fill it up with values. So let's look at what that looks like in real life. And I'm going to call this unique ID, this is going to be our file path name. And so this way, if someone uploads the same image twice, there's not a problem. And so I'll say window, or the same named file, right? We don't want to use the file name. So we don't want to have a whole bunch of 0.jpegs in our thing. So we'll say window.crypto, we'll invoke that library, and we'll say get random values, and pass in what it wants, which is a typed array. And we haven't looked at this, but and actually I'm going to pass in not an integer type, but a uint type. And we can see there's actually, this is one of the JavaScript types, uint32 array. A typed array represents an array of 32-bit unsigned integers. And so we'll pass in, we'll give it, we want one of those, and we're going to grab that one. And so let's see what happens if we console.log unique ID here. We won't be uploading anything when we drag and drop. We're just going to, and we won't be displaying anything either. We just should see a nice juicy number here off to the side. And so I'll drag this over here and make sure I get it in the drop zone. And we get this nice juicy identifier number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that should be enough for our purposes. So let's set that equal to, we'll create a file path that we'll add to our upload, a place to kind of store our data. And I'll say file path equals, we'll use Java, we'll use a template literal, and we'll say images at unique ID, and then dot JPEG. Even though it's a type PNG, it should work just fine. Even if it's a type PNG, it should work just fine. But I suppose I could say file.type there, but whatever. I'm not going to deal with that. And now I'm going to make this, I'm going to actually upload this to firebase storage. And I'm going to store this upload in a variable in case I want to get it later. And I'm going to invoke this thing that I created before called storage. So we've got storage equals firebase.storage, and we're going to call that storage, and we're going to say storage.ref.child, and pass in our file path. So what's going on here? Our storage.ref, if we go to Firebase storage, we're creating a storage reference. So first I make a reference to Firebase storage, and now I'm creating a storage reference. And that storage reference is going to be at this location. And so this is going to be my new location. I'm going to make a new storage reference location that'll be at this place, which is file path. And so it's going to be in a folder called images, and it's going to have this unique identifier here. And so that from that path name, I'll be able to actually get this data later. And then I can put into that reference location, I can put my file and my metadata, and now I'm going to call a function on that process. And this is a really confusing thing in JavaScript and in JavaScript asynchronous code. And I'm going to make a later video where I talk more about promises, which is what this is. So what's happening here is when I call storageref.child, create this location, and I call .put, and I put this file in the metadata, that's going to take a little bit of time to happen. So on the Firebase side, they structured this as a thing called a promise, which will have on it a method called then. And what happens is it calls this function, put file and metadata, and it waits for a response. And when that response happens, I can say .then with the response, which is going to have a snapshot argument. Then I can take that snapshot that gets returned from that process, and I can say get the download URL. And that itself is going to be a promise, which will return me some data, and I can in the form of a download URL, and I can now take that download URL and log it out to the console, and also add it to Firestore, which we'll do in the next video. But for now, let's just see if we get an image in our image gallery. So what we're hoping is up here at Firebase Storage, when I drag and drop an image in here, we should see that image appear in Firestore. And you see we get nothing here. We got the download URL. There we go. And now if I go to Firebase Storage and refresh my browser, dun, da, da, there's the folder. There's the image. Now we want to take this download URL and we want to use this download URL, which I'll show you how to do I'll show you what we're going to do with it in the next video. We're going to take this URL and use that to create our gallery.